When it comes to the late game of ecom, and when I say late game, I mean really getting the store past 7 figures per month. And in that case, generally Google is going to be contributing a pretty good amount. It could be anywhere from the low 6 figures to mid 6 figures. You're going to have a unique strategy for your type of store. When it comes to scaling Google Ads accounts, especially in the world of ecom, a lot of them can start out similarly, I would say strategy-wise. Like you can get away with, to a certain point, building things how you would across multiple stores. But when it comes to really making a difference and having the channel pull in multiple 6 figures per month and above to help your store get past $1 million per month, it's gonna come down to how you're strategically building out the Google Ads account for your specific type of store. So in this video, what we're gonna do is go over how we're building out our lower ticket stores on the Google Ads side for ecom. And that's gonna be really stores that are doing generally at most $100 AOV. You'd be a little bit above that, but a lot of the times it's stores that have maybe a $50, $60, $70 AOV, and their products could be $30 to $70. You know, if it's $30, people are most likely buying two, buy one, get one half off, that kind of thing. But in most cases, it's gonna be around those numbers. And when it comes to these types of stores, we found that this type of build just tends to carry them farther. This is also it almost contradicts the way that we build the higher ticket stores. We have separate videos about that. But through testing, we just find what works best for certain types of stores, and then we cater it towards that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we believe, it just matters what makes our clients the most amount of money and takes the stores we're running on the Google Ads side the farthest. So this is an example of one of the stores that we run. They spend about 130, 140K a month on the off season, and then scale up heavily on the seasonality side of things, especially during Q4. But you can see the AOV, it's generally gonna be about $70 for this store. The CPA is about 30, 35 bucks, but the numbers carry pretty far. This store specifically is more concerned about kind of eating market, taking up market share than profitability. So this account could be ran more profitably, but the owner of the store wants to take up as much market share as possible on the back end. That way they can scale as much in the market as possible and eventually sell the store. Some people prioritize profit. This one's just not that case. But the uniqueness about these types of builds is it's almost in between going really category based and then also going very broad. You're kind of leveraging both. And we've seen this really carry the campaigns to a farther level of scale. Now, the first type of campaign we're going to talk about is PMAX. PMAX, like we always talk about in these videos, is a very big part of ecom Google Ads strategy because it shows on so many parts of the platform, has so many unique placements, and also the algorithm will carry it pretty far. This is generally going to yield about half of the revenue for your store when it comes to low ticket. The other half of revenue is generally going to be split between shopping and then search, which we'll talk about, and then some other smaller campaign types like YouTube remarketing, things of that nature. But when it comes to PMAX, this is going to be exactly how we're building out the strategy in the account I just referenced, among other accounts just like theirs that's lower ticket. So the first thing you want to know about PMAX is what you're doing with the asset groups. With this specific store type, with the asset groups, instead of having, for example, a catch-all like we talked about in the last video that was more on higher ticket, we're actually going to have an asset group per main category of the store. So you're going to create an asset group for each main category of the store. And then what you're going to do is have assets kind of maxed out in that asset group, unique to that category. Simple concept, make sure to always max out the assets you can use, whether they're written or visual, within reason. But usually the more assets you can put in there within reason that look good, you're gonna have more output. That's because Google's gonna have the ability to swap between them at a higher efficiency and allow them to test more behind the scenes. So it always helps the PMAX. But so you're gonna have asset groups per category. Next is gonna be signals. So this is something that's also unique. We've tested both. We've actually found that a lack of signals in this situation will actually do the best. So when it comes to the asset groups per category, we're not including very much signal wise. You could maybe leverage some past store data, like the highest end data. We've talked about kind of adding maybe the top 20% wealth demographic buyers, maybe some offline feedback from Zapier. But aside from that, you're gonna let the algorithm do a little bit more work here, because it just seems to be in some cases, when you give the algorithm more freedom, it'll actually take it farther. Now, that's a tricky situation, right? Because we talked about not doing that in other circumstances. So it's very, very situational. But in this exact circumstance, we found that no signals actually scale the campaigns farther. Once again, this is very specific to this type of store. Last is gonna be only one PMAX and the bidding style. So when I say only one PMAX, we talked about in other videos having separate PMAXs for different categories of products. This PMAX is going to be what we call a catch-all. So it's going to have all products going through it. Whereas in other scenarios, we might actually have, let's say, a PMAX for the catch-all and then a separate PMAX for like top products or the top product, whatever it is. But in this case, we're just want to include all products in this one PMAX, which means only one PMAX. And then we're also going to use the bidding style of ROAS. So ROAS, target return on ad spend, it's going to be a maximized conversion value based bidding model. And this is going to allow the campaign to hone in more on who you want to target in the category who you're trying to target. What I mean by that is because you're letting things be a bit more broad on the campaign side, you want to still tell Google, of everyone we could possibly show these specific products to, I only want to go after the people who will yield this type of return. And in this case, it's about 200%. It's going to be close to what you're trying to target as the actual ROI, but this does not always work as it should. You want to play around with what works best for your campaigns. Like you might, for example, target 160% ROAS, but it'll keep the campaign at 2.2x. Sometimes it's just funky and you kind of have to play around with it and surf that wave to see what works best for your exact situation. But do not always assume what you put in there is exactly what you're going to get, is what I'm trying to say. Try to figure out what balance is going to get you the most ROI in this circumstance. After PMAX is going to be shopping. Shopping also is a little unique for this type of build. And when it comes to shopping, this is going to be a scenario where we have multiple campaigns for the entire account. They're going to be split in certain ways though, so we're going to talk about that. But with shopping, what you're going to do is the first campaign you're going to do, and this is subjective to the amount of products you have. In this specific situation, we have 30 top products. So we're using that for the situation. You might have 10 top products, you might have 50 top products. Whatever it is, the kind of 80-20 rule, what products are bringing in the 80% of the revenue. A lot of the times it's going to be 10 to 20% of the products. So in this case, it's going to be 30. And what we're doing is we're having one ad group per product. So you're actually going to segment and have each individual product in its own ad group. You don't have to do more than that. Everything else is dynamic, but you're basically going to set up the campaign to have one product per ad group. And then of course, the amount of products is going to reflect the top sellers in your actual store. Next is going to be a catch-all campaign. And this is going to be split up in a certain way in the ad group side. The way they're split up just tend to let the campaigns operate better. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, in the top 30 ad group campaign, that's going to give Google very specific, pointer signals to focus on specific products. Whereas on the other campaign, and they kind of work together, even though there's technically overlap, they still work together. The other campaign, it's catch-all, so it's going to allow the algorithm to have a little bit more control on what it's going to show based off what's in there. But within the catch-all, you're going to have we'll sneak a little all in there. You're going to have ad groups, 3 different types of ad groups. One's going to be top products, which we just talked about how you would choose those. Next is going to be the rest. So we'll do rest of products. And then the third one's going to be number one seller. Once again, this is all based on all the testing we've done. We're constantly testing things because the amount of clients we have, the amount we spend per month, it's kind of between $1 to $2 million per month right now in spend. We're able to test at a very high rate. And the reason these work, as I talk to you about them, they sound logical, right? Like, okay, that makes sense. But the only reason I'm telling you these work is because out of everything we've tested and all the different structures we tested, these have carried the campaigns the farthest. That's why it's important to base it off of that, because you can always go off of what makes sense logically, but the biggest thing is going to be the data feedback and what actually allows the campaigns to scale the farthest, which is always going to be proof in the data back into the account. But when it comes to segmenting these, the way you do that's pretty simple. You're going to do it within the feed, and you're just going to segment it based off of this list that I talked about. And that's going to allow the campaign to have kind of full reach over the products you're going after. It's still giving it some signals like number one seller, the rest of the products, top 30, but it's still giving the algorithm a little bit of leeway too. So it plays in the algorithm a little bit more, especially because it's such a dynamic campaign type. And you're not giving it very, very specific things to go after like you would on search. You need to play in the algorithm sometimes. So that's going to be the biggest thing for shopping. After shopping, we're going to get into the search strategy. Search is also relatively simple. I say relatively simple because I've been doing this for so long, but the way we chop it up is not rocket science. With this specific circumstance, the first is going to be TOF traffic. So TOF traffic is just top of funnel traffic. These are people who aren't necessarily aware of your product yet. They might be in the market to buy a product like yours, but they don't know your store necessarily exists, and we're trying to get them to your store to make a conversion. So when it comes to TOF, there's 3 types of ad groups that we're running in this main campaign. One's going to be a very simple DSA ad group. DSA ad group is dynamic search ad. This is giving the campaign algorithm side a little bit more leeway, like we talked about on the shopping side. This is gonna let the algorithm take a little bit of control in that ad group and see how well it does. Next is gonna be a phrase match ad group. And these are gonna be terms that are more store-based. So in this exact circumstance, we found that product-based terms are highly competitive. So a lot of the times the cost per click in the terms just wouldn't equate to the CPA that was needed for the specific type of store. So what we did, we stepped a little bit broader to store-based terms and found that because the traffic's cheaper, we could scale into those harder. So it just comes down to testing your specific store avenue. But in this case, we found that most scale and the most profitable scale was going after those broader store-based terms. And the way we chop that up is one phrase match, one broad match. We'll talk about that in a second, but first is gonna be phrase. This is gonna be basically an ad group full of the different phrase match terms that would be relevant to the store. Next is gonna be broad match. Same concept. You're basically just expanding on what the phrase match are. A lot of the times this could be just the phrase match terms that you're targeting, but as broad match, you're trying to see between the two ad groups, what's gonna be able to scale out farther. And maybe you can separate these into separate campaigns too. We have them in the same campaign just for this circumstance because they're operating well together. But sometimes in other circumstances with different stores, we'll separate them so they have their own dedicated budget. But the way that these operate is unique, right? Phrase is gonna be specific to intent based off of what you're targeting, where broad is still intent driven because you're going after those terms, but it gives the algorithm more control. Both of these is gonna use ROAS as well. And you're just gonna wanna play around with the ROAS close to what you're aiming for within each ad group to what does the best for the ad group. So I would start very close to what you're aiming for and then go up and down based off of how the data is reacting. The other search campaign that's running is gonna be BOF. We'll just sneak that in right here. And this is really just warm traffic. So these are people who are aware of your store, probably searching for your specific type of product, maybe the actual store name, whatever it is. In this scenario, it's a little bit subjective to store. In this store, they have a very, I would say not necessarily competitive store name, but the store name includes industry-based words. So people are extremely targeted on those terms, which just happen to show for the store name as well. So their goal is to really protect their traffic as best as possible because people might not necessarily go after their name directly, but because the name includes terms that are unique to the industry, they're still by nature targeting those. So in this case, we're gonna go after pretty much every term that's relevant based off the products and the store name. And then on top of that, the way we're targeting them is gonna be with exact match. So we're very specific to those terms. We don't wanna give the algorithm a lot of control. We just wanna capture of people who are searching exactly those terms, can we get all the traffic possible? And the way we do that also is gonna be with max clicks. So this is not a bidding model that's used often, but because we're going exact match on the terms being targeted, and we know that we want as much possible traffic of those terms, we're gonna use a bidding model that says to Google, I don't care what I have to do, but I want every single impression possible and every click possible. And in this case, it works well for that brand. So it's just something that you need to decide whether or not it's worth prioritizing. If somebody's searching your brand and your products and you just show up organically and no one's ranking there on the ad side, probably not the biggest deal in the world. But if you're like this store and people are constantly showing up for your brand and warm targeting terms, it's gonna be important to protect it because the cost that it'll cost to protect those terms will be significantly lower than the revenue that you'll retain from people not going to other stores and buying from competitors. The last thing is gonna be scale. Now, when it comes to scale, there's really two ways you're gonna scale this store. And it's not so much about extreme strategy, it's more about off-season and on-season. So when it comes to off-season, this is very similar to other stores. Really, you're just trying to slowly climb and grow the store. This is like normal market. You're trying to consistently optimize campaigns, do new tests. You're gonna have winners, losers, whatever it is. The goal is a very steady increase, right? You don't want retraction. There will be times throughout months or throughout weeks in certain months where you'll have dynamic ups and downs. That's just part of the game. In those cases, you just want to mitigate budget and make sure to move budget along with those ups and downs because there will be different buying patterns that you have to play along with in any market. But the biggest thing is going to be with holiday scaling. So for example, this store that we showed you, in the average market, it might do, let's say 200 to 300K per month minimum in revenue. But when it comes to like Q4 or holiday scaling, let's say there's a month where there's heavy holidays, this store is going to shoot up aggressively. So for example, on a normal season month, it might do 300K. On a Q4 month, it could be doing 1.5 million. This is a store that scales very hard during holiday sales. So the thing you want to do, which we talk about all the time, is increase budget preemptively. If you don't have past data of your own store, Try to also see what the growth is like on other stores you're competing with, because really what you're looking for is, okay, if we know this store is likely to 5x during the sale this month, how much do we have to increase the budget to get ready for that? And you have very finite time when it comes to holiday sales. So if you know over the next 5 days, the store should 5x as a whole, okay, let's maybe increase the budget preemptively 3 times. Let's check midday. Did he eat that whole budget? Is the store sales looking healthy on the store data side? Awesome, let's increase it another, a few hundred or $1,000 per day, whatever it is. At that point, you can make increases per day. We rarely recommend increases per day unless it's holiday sales, just because you're not gonna have extreme scale during non-heightened seasons. But when it comes to the sales, that's when you can do it preemptively. And once again, you're not gonna get enough data feedback time to the actual platform to make those judgment calls on platform. So you're really gonna have to get a feel of like the store revenue. Okay, I made an increase and I spent $5,000 this day during the sale. Did my store go up proportionally? Also counting in the other platforms that are happening. And then if it did, then you can make another aggressive increase. And really the goal in that situation is just to eat up as much market share as possible, because the conversion rate is gonna be so heightened within reason. So that's gonna be, we'll call that on season scale. And then of course, scale down your campaigns after the sale. There's gonna be some point where conversion rate's gonna fall off, and that's when you wanna be very aggressive with the pullback. Rarely ever will it slowly trickle down. So usually what you're gonna wanna do is pull it right back to where you started with the normal off-season scale you're at, and then you can increase slowly based off the ROI that's coming back in the account after the sale. So that's gonna be the wrap up for this video. If you have any questions about anything I talked about in this video, please drop it in the comment section. I'll make sure to get a reply myself. You can always hit us up on the socials and I will check out what your situation is like and give you feedback to hopefully make you more money. Otherwise, make sure to like and subscribe. We always appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.